All right, let's dive into a legal puzzle that seems pretty simple at first glance, but it gets really weird when you look closer. This is the case of the unwilling victims. So, right at the heart of this story is a number that's just hard to wrap your head around. Investors are claiming losses that add up to nearly $6 billion. Yeah, billion with a B. An absolutely staggering amount of money. Now, when you hear a number like that, you probably think you know how this story goes, right? Investors lose a ton of cash, they blame the person who took it. But when you ask who these investors are blaming, the answer is, well, it's definitely not what you'd expect. This whole thing revolves around one single federal criminal case, United States versus Ho Wan Quoc. The government story is that Quoc and his associates ran this huge fraud scheme, taking billions from followers and then using that money to fund their own, super lavish lifestyles. But here's where it gets truly bizarre. This is the central paradox, and it's pulled word for word from the court filings. The lawyer for the investors writes, "Innocent investors passionately resist being called victims." I mean, just let that sink in. The people who lost the money are literally fighting against the label of victim. So, what on earth is going on here? To even start to untangle this, we first need to figure out who's who in this billion-dollar battle. There are really three distinct sides to this story. First up, you've got the U.S. government. They're the prosecution, and they're saying a crime was definitely committed. Second, you have the defendants, Ho Wan Quoc and his team, who say they're completely innocent. And then you have this third and by far the most unusual group, the claimants, who are the thousands of investors, the supposed victims. And we are not talking about just a handful of people. Get this. A single lawyer is representing over 6,500 of these investors, and every one of them is trying to get their money back. And this is where you see the two totally conflicting stories. On one hand, the government's view is simple. Investors got scammed. On the other hand, the investors' view is the complete opposite. They claim they were harmed by the government's decision to come in and seize the company's assets. So let's dig a little deeper into this. Let's look at the arguments from these unwilling victims. Why are they pointing the finger not at the defendants, but at the prosecutors themselves? Their legal team puts it pretty bluntly in the court filing. They argue there's no evidence that the investors in this thing, the Himalaya Exchange, or HEX, actually lost any money until the government intervened. They're claiming the government's seizure of assets is what actually caused the financial harm. Basically, in their telling, the cure was the disease. So why don't they feel cheated? Their argument seems to hinge on a legal concept called puffery. It's a term for those big, subjective, exaggerated claims a company makes. Like saying you have the world's best coffee. The investors are arguing that the defendants' optimistic projections and ambitious statements, well, that was all just puffery, not actual criminal fraud. So here's the crucial point. These investors fundamentally believe that the Himalaya Exchange was a legitimate, functioning business. For many of them, this wasn't just an investment. It was a cause they believed in. And in their eyes, the government just swooped in, froze everything, and that single action is what cost them all their money. Taking this stance, as you can imagine, creates a whole new world of problems. Their fight isn't just about who to blame anymore, it's about trying to navigate this incredibly complex maze to get their money back from the very government they're holding responsible. And what a maze it is. The court filings list 6 huge barriers that make this nearly impossible for them. A lot of investors don't speak English. They have zero experience with the U.S. legal system. And since the government shut the exchange down, they can't even access their own account information to prove their claims. Plus, for many who live abroad, the official U.S. government website they need to use is just blocked. And this really highlights the human cost, which goes way beyond just the money. Many of these claimants are identified in the legal docs as Chinese dissidents. They're terrified that if they participate in a U.S. court case, their personal information could be exposed, leading to some really severe retaliation back home. As if that wasn't enough, there's one final layer of chaos just thrown on top of everything. A widespread legal mix-up that's making things even more complicated. It's a tale of 2 completely different courts. It's a classic case of getting lost in the system. See, the criminal case is in the U.S. District Court in New York. That's where they need to file claims for their money. But there's a totally separate, completely unrelated business bankruptcy case happening over in Connecticut. And the investor's lawyer says that countless people are sending their complaints to the wrong court, which gets them absolutely nowhere. You can almost feel the lawyer's exasperation in this direct quote from the filing. He says the only appropriate response he can give to these confused people is, "I think you should consult a US-based attorney about that," which is really just the polite, lawyerly way of saying you're in the completely wrong place. So let's bring this all back together. At the end of the day, this entire multi-billion-dollar legal battle, it all boils down to a fight over the real definitions of victim and harm. So you have these two polar opposite positions. The government says the defendants are to blame for all the financial losses. The investors say the government is to blame. And this leaves this massive question mark hanging right in the middle of it all. And that's really the central question of this whole case, isn't it? When the people you're trying to protect are passionately insisting they don't need protecting from the villain, who is the real victim then? And what does justice even look like in a situation like this?